This is one of the best books I've ever read on business to business marketing. It's written by the Chief Marketing Officer of PwC. The reason I really like it is there isn't a lot of fluff. It's a very detailed framework with very detailed examples of how to execute and create a business to business marketing plan and content strategy. Now, what I would say is that this book is particularly effective if you're marketing a strategic business to business purchase. So, something like a professional service or software that's very critical to differentiating products in the market. But if you're marketing something like screws or bolts or industrial commodities, that sort of thing, it's probably not the model you're going to want to use because the buying process for those is quite a bit different. Instead, what I would do is I'd look at the thought leadership from Dr. James Anderson. I want to start with one of the most interesting data points that's in the book. This is research that was done from global research, Source Global Research. And we can see that when companies are in the stage where they're shortlisting professional services, just as an example, but you could extrapolate this to many business to business situations, we have a list of what's most important. And at the very top of that list is brand and reputation. Now, that might surprise a lot of people because in business to business, there's a very strong emphasis on lead generation, on doing things like gated content, on demand generation, account-based marketing, but we see that it's actually the brand that is the most important, at least at this stage. Now, these variables will vary in their importance depending on which stage of the buyer journey you're in. However, this is one of the critical stages that people are fixated on. So, brand and reputation, number one, quality of the firm's subject matter experts. Number two, senior knowledge and expertise, ability to implement. And then if we go down way to the bottom, we have things like culture, methodology, breadth of services, account management, etc., which just really aren't that important for the shortlisting process. So reputation is the number one reason buyers choose one company over another, and that basically translates to brand. That means you should be investing in brand marketing, especially as your company scales and you want to get bigger and bigger. Now, we do have a quote from another chief marketing officer here that says that he likes to overinvest in the middle of the funnel. So even though brand is incredibly important, he's actually allocating most of his money towards that persuasive convincing in the middle stages. So 60% to consideration, 20% to brand, and 20% to supporting sales. Now, this is in contrast with a lot of the thinking out there, influenced by people like Les Binet, the LinkedIn Business to Business Institute, which more or less says that you should be investing about half of your marketing in brand and the other half in sales activation. But really, we see here that most of it's going towards the middle of the funnel, the consideration, and only 20% to the very bottom and 20% to the very top. Allocate budget between brand and lead generation. That's something you need to consider. Not all business to business marketing is just performance or demand generation. Brand investment can have as much impact closing pipeline as driving future business performance. So that's something to understand too, is that when you invest in brand, the benefits are accrued. Some of the benefits are accrued immediately. It's not just far into the future. If a large percentage of your revenue comes from a small percentage of clients, you can focus on account-based marketing and increasing market share. Now, there are thought leaders out there, particularly on LinkedIn, that are suggesting that ABM is a bad idea, that you're too narrowly focused, you should be going much broader. But in certain situations, if you're only going after, say, Fortune 50 companies, and that's where the vast majority of your revenue comes from, then ABM makes perfect sense. Now, when we look at the business to business funnel, we shouldn't think of it so much as a funnel as a framework with people at various stages needing information. Now, interestingly, the author here came to essentially the same conclusion I did with a very similar framework independently. So when I developed my own framework for business to business marketing, it mapped reasonably well to what the CMO of PwC came up with. So we're triangulating here on what's most effective, and it's really thinking in terms of these stages. Buyers can be in any of these stages simultaneously. We'll get into what those stages are. That's basically the bulk of the book, and we'll go into very good detail on that. And there are basically two people that are involved in this buying decision at these different stages. So the first is senior people who are taking a high-level view. on an ambiguous problem. So the problem hasn't really been articulated yet. Now, a lot of business to business buyers, they say, oh, use PAS. So problem, agitate, solve. Always talk about the problem and the solution. The problem is that when you're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, you don't even know that there is a problem. You don't know if the problem is even worth solving. You haven't even articulated. You're thinking more in terms of there's this big macro change that's coming. There's regulation that's coming. How do I just wrap my head around that? That's why thought leadership is so important. And now the second group is the functional buyers who already have clear problems. And often what they do is they create a short list of vendors. So when you create content that's very focused on the problem, you're really only appealing to the second group. You're not getting those early stage people that are looking for thought leadership. Now, a lot of people in business buying are really trying to mitigate risk, and often that's their own reputations in the company. Having worked in a Fortune 100 company, I can say that a lot of it has to do with politics and reputation, not necessarily making the best decision, but making the decision that is least likely to get you blamed. That's the kind of thinking a lot of the times in these large companies. Implementation requires several departments. There's on average 7 people involved in buying decisions, and that's based on data from companies with 100 to 500 employees. So you need to influence a broad group of people. Prospects going deeper into decision making without talking to sales is the trend that we're seeing now. So they're doing all the research through digital channels. They're not speaking to sales in the beginning. And in fact, 57% of the decision-making process is really done before they even speak to a salesperson at all. The other thing that we're seeing is that business-to-business brands are competing with business-to-consumer brands for attention, right? We're all in the same marketplaces like Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. So we need to fight to get that share of mind. And people aren't just thinking about business-to-business brands. They're also thinking of consumer brands, and sometimes brands cater to both. Search and websites are critical to research. Jason Lemkin says your website should look even better than your product. Now, the other thing to note is that business-to-business buyers typically change service providers once every 5 years. So that means in any given, you only have 20% of people that are in market during a year. So if all you're trying to do is generate short-term sales, do lead generation, you may be leaving out 80% of potential buyers. Budgets are set annually, but returns can be many years out. So let's say we influence the other 80% with our marketing today. Well, we may not realize revenue from that until years into the future. So we have to change our thinking in terms of investments in marketing. Precise targeting may be more lucrative. So we do see that with ABM. I've been looking at case studies, for example, SaaS companies that generate $1 million in 6 months and added ARR, and that's doing ABM tactics, things like direct mail, cold email, LinkedIn engagements, things like that. Buyers of complex solutions only spend 70% of their time interacting directly with sales. So if they're interacting with 3 different vendors, your competitors, that means only 5-6% of their time is actually spent with your sales team. That means that marketing really has to make up for most of that interaction before the sales team is involved. Another key thing is to ascertain where people are at in the journey before sending them to sales. So in my experience, people are premature in sending leads to sales, sending accounts to sales, and they're not qualified. So you really need to think about the nurturing and identifying what stage people are at. And we'll give some tips on stage identification later in this video. Another key thing is to nudge prospects to the next stage in the buying journey where their needs are going to change and those evolve. Especially when you're dealing with long sales cycles. So if the sales cycle is a year, then of course the needs, what they're investigating, research, considering, shortlisting, et cetera, is going to change as you move along. All right, so this is the core framework that we're using in the book, and it's basically 5 stages of the buyer journey. It starts with Horizon Scanner. Number 2 is Explorer, 3 is Hunter, 4 is Active Buyer, and then lastly, number 5 is Client. So we're gonna talk about these extensively, and we're gonna repeat them a lot in this video. So Horizon Scanner is if you really want to think in terms of a funnel, this is like your top of funnel or the beginning. Senior people looking for insights into a new problem or opportunity, so maybe like a regulation change or new technology. So for example, AI. Or generative AI more specifically. How is that going to impact my industry? How could it impact my company? They're seeking opinions and insights about growth or competitive advantage. That's what the C-suite's really looking for here. They're looking for data, points of view, expert opinions, not details about your product, how emerging trends affect strategy. They're looking for thought, leadership, ideas, not solutions. Okay, when we haven't even really defined the problem, we're not looking for a solution for it. Needs to be presented in third-party publications or events that you do not own. It's more likely to be trusted there. So doing things like PR. So I use this tool called Help a Reporter Out to make sure that my thought leadership gets published in major publications. And that gives me added credibility. You need to work with peers, analysts, and appeal to journalists by having an angle. An angle is something like a new insight or data or something really surprising or exciting. That's what journalists want. That's the juice that fuels their publications. And the key objective in this first stage, this horizon scanner stage, is position you as an expert to create or address unstated buyer needs. So they haven't really articulated the needs yet. All right, stage number 2, explore. So this is where you formulate the problem at a high level. You want to define a point of view relevant to the company for a new problem or opportunity. So you should have an opinion. Opinions and ideas about what others are doing. So they want to know, what are other companies in my industry doing, or even outside my industry. You want to create a high-level business case. And the biggest competition you faced is your customer society. They can go it alone, and they can postpone the decision to a later date or not act at all. So oftentimes we think of our competition as, oh, it's this other business or this other product, but often it's just doing nothing. It's just inertia is really what you're up against, or just relying on the status quo. Maybe just if you're selling software, for example, maybe they're just going to stick with using Excel, for example. Key objective, create a market for what you sell and an imperative to act. Stage 3, hunter. They know what product they need. They may be switching. So maybe they already have a product and now the contract's up. Maybe they have a specific need due to regulation changes. They have a clear idea of requirements. They want to know your track record in delivering, what differentiates you. The prospects want technical expertise, opinions, and evidence that you can help them. They want detailed information and proof points. And the key objective is to differentiate and be easy to buy. Now, in terms of differentiation, there's a big argument in the marketing world that, does distinctiveness matter or differentiation matter? And the core argument is centered around differentiation being substantial difference, or difference that fundamentally matters, whereas distinctiveness is this idea that superficial differences centered around the brand are what matters. And I would say both matter depending on the context. So for the majority of business-to-business products, fundamental differentiation doesn't matter. And we have a lot of evidence, a lot of research, for example, from the Kellogg School of Management, that shows that when vendors try to push differentiation and force it, it doesn't work. That's not what buyers are looking for. Because if you're trying to buy, say, a bunch of screws or a live chat plugin or just some functional thing, which is what most business-to-business purchases are, differentiation is a distraction. Basically, what you need to do in cases like that is focus on other things like payment terms. If you have more favorable payment terms, or you offer some sort of special perk like white glove onboarding, things that aren't fundamental differentiators but can make a bit of a difference. But however, this book is really focused on, it doesn't state it as this. I'm contextualizing where the CMO is coming from. It's really about marketing professional services and other strategic business-to-business purchases where differentiation does matter a lot. Can you generate stronger ROI? Can you increase cost savings? Can you do things faster? We're dealing with products where there's a lot of evaluation. For example, these horizon scanners are often the C-suite. You don't get that kind of evaluation with most business-to-business products, and that's often why there's a debate in the marketing world around how best to approach B2B marketing. Now, the other thing is you want to be easy to buy, so don't be overly complicated. And we have some research too that most buyers would renew, for example, digitally if they could, rather than needing to speak to a salesperson. Okay, now we have an active buyer. They have a short list of companies or vendors to buy from. They want to know how you are better than the competition. They want practical details. They want timely responses. They're looking for pitches. And the key objective here for you is to accelerate decision making and pipeline. Now, last stage here is a client. So here you're trying to get feedback from them. You want to get referrals from them. Most don't give referrals because they're never asked to, even though they say they're willing to. And the key objectives here are loyalty and increase in share of wallet. Now, note the difference here between strategic thought leadership and detailed functional information. If you're providing thought leadership, you're not trying to sell the product. You're trying to sell your expertise, essentially. Prove that you are an expert and that your point of view matters. Also note the difference in KPIs. So for example, in the first stage may only apply to a very small group of people. So maybe the C-suite in Fortune 50 companies. So trying to measure the KPIs in terms of the volume of traffic is almost useless or pointless because you're only trying to influence a very small group of people. And you could see that tracking something like website traffic or leads at that stage would lead you in the completely wrong direction. The other thing is that the total addressable market, or the TAM, will likely change through the stages. So you can actually think of your total addressable market as smaller at the top of the funnel than at the bottom, because as the task gets delegated down the corporate hierarchy, more people get involved, more underlings get involved, whereas there's only a handful of people at the very top of an organization. All right, now we have this nice little graphic here from the book that talks about what buyers are looking for at each stage. So horizon scanners, they're looking for market trends or innovation to help grow their company. Explorers, they know the problem. They're trying to define a point of view and the outcomes they want to achieve. They're looking for outside help. Hunter, I know the business service I need. It's really about comparing different vendors or competitors. Active buyer, I'm seriously considering your company and I need specific information to make a better decision. And maybe that information needs to go to, for example, IT to evaluate whether it works with their existing infrastructure, et cetera. Now, if we look at what types of information that they want at Horizon Scanner, opinions, discussions, insights to shape strategic decisions. Explorer, options, opinions, high-level business cases, industry points of view, case studies. Hunter, detailed info, proof points, case studies. Active buyer, specific answers, RFP response, access to the right team to get the right questions answered. And then at the client stage, tailored content, relevant new solutions that could help them, etc. Now, your role in each stage is going to change. So Horizon Scanner, you're trying to address undefined buyer needs. You're trying to influence peers, regulators, journalists, market observers. You're trying to give fresh insights. You want to focus on themes and issues that matter to the prospects. In the Explorer stage, you want to engage. You want people engaging with your company. You're trying to create a market for solutions. Your key challenges are the client's procrastination, their inertia, believing they can do it themselves, maybe build the software internally or just hire somebody to do whatever it is that you offer. You need to convince them that they need a third party, that they need to hire an external resource to solve their problem. They want a point of view on what is happening in the market, and you need to transition from high-level perspective to more specific. So, for example, go from will capital solve climate change, which is high-level, to retooling banks for sustainable lending. You can see the positioning is very different there. Hunter stage, differentiate and demonstrate how you can achieve outcomes. So this is kind of where a lot of copywriters think of business-to-business marketing is just sell the outcome, and that's really important at this stage, but perhaps less so at the Horizon Scanner stage. Active buyer, they're looking for features, benefits, technical specs, make it easy for them to buy from you, and client, make them know the full breadth of your offerings. Often they don't know that there are other services, products that you sell that would be useful to them. Now, throughout this book, we're talking about three types of metrics. So often business buyers are only focused on one, like pipeline revenue, number of leads, CAC, etc. But you need to think in terms of short-term, mid-term, and long-term, and you need to track KPIs differently. So we have input metrics, which, for example, could be number of blogs, events, pitch docs, demo vids, etc. So this is the activity or the inputs. And then we have outputs, which would be pipeline, won revenue, NPS, brand equity. And then last, we have indicator metrics, which is, for example, the likelihood of hitting a target, a projection. Because if you have that, then you can course correct and say, oh, we need to invest more money or we need to increase the input, something like that. You want to provide case studies and detailed product info. Having worked in product marketing for years, I think that's thoroughly lacking. Often marketers just say, oh, go speak to sales if you want to get more product details, but really it's marketing's job to supply that. Now we're going to go into a bit more detail on Horizon Scanner, which is basically like our top of funnel, if you want to think of it that way. Focus on thought leadership. Prospect doesn't know what they want, or even if they want anything at all. Focus on macroeconomic trends, so technology, demographics, supply chain bottlenecks. You want to provide info to inform strategy. Position yourself as an expert in your field or category leader in the market. Educate buyers. Remember, it's not persuasion, it's education mostly. Outreach to journalists, analysts, regulators, and policymakers. Articulate problems that you solve. Work with partners and industry associations. One trick here, as well as reaching out to journalists and analysts, is I like to use SparkToro to identify who most influences the target customers. Have point of views that need to tie back to what you sell. I've seen this a lot too, where companies will publish a lot of content that gets a lot of traction, but it doesn't segue easily into what you sell, so it's kind of meaningless developing your thought leadership in that space. Now, the other thing is your thought leadership should be memorable. So that means having like an interesting angle, surprising data find, something like that. Then people are going to recall it. Also branding it well. So using, for example, a mascot, picture of a polar bear if that's your icon for your brand. Use social listening, current clients as well to guide your thinking and what to prepare in your thought leadership. Follow up. When people consume one piece of thought leadership, follow up with more insights. As risk increases for the buyers, people buy from experts. So you need to think of yourself as an expert and position yourself as an expert. Your content should be interesting. And perhaps most importantly, it should have a distinctive point of view and also an allure of exclusivity. So for example, proprietary research, surveys, and a fresh perspective. Thought leadership, not too long. You're dealing with the C-suite. They don't have much time. Sector-specific trends are a good starting point for thought leadership. Provide insights, not solutions. Look at publications like the Wall Street Journal, Economist, Bloomberg, Financial Times. Work with journalists, develop relationships with journalists by providing them with data or insights, and try to co-author pieces or at least get your commentary into those publications. For paid, look at promoting thought leadership rather than products. And a good example of this would be the new thought leadership ads from LinkedIn advertising. You can sponsor and attend events, and you can do things like send direct mail with a book or white paper written by people that worked at your company. So, for example, I was helping a major company in the financial space position themselves as thought leaderships with behavioral economics, which is a big trending topic at the time. Now, metrics at the Horizon Scanner stage. Input, number of journalists, conversations, number of articles, research people, pieces, social posts, events. Indicator metrics, requests for commentary and publications, social mentions, social followers from relevant accounts, interactions with influencers, number of reads, views, signups for events, event sessions. Outcome metrics, number of articles that you get featured in, share a voice, engagements with content, time spent engaging with content, attendee numbers, and qualitative feedback from the clients. Tell them what to do next. So for example, by giving them more thought leadership that's related to the initial thought leadership they consumed, get them to the next phase of the journey. For example, pushing them to an upcoming roundtable. All right, now, second stage, explore. They know the problem they need to solve at a high level. They're seeking opinions, ideas, and what other companies are doing, not necessarily in their sector. Show that you understand the problem. Create imperative to act, so create urgency. Expand your audience. So for example, chief human resource officers might be your main target, but this is going to broaden substantially at this stage. And then you're going to need to influence heads of payroll, heads of talent, IT, etc. In my experience, very easy to do that with LinkedIn advertising, especially if you're launching awareness ads. In your content, you want to inject urgency. So I would say something like how much money you stand to lose or the cost of not acting to create a sense of like loss aversion, basically tapping into that fundamental bias that humans have. Opinion pieces are good. Industry insights and market trends are good. Digital diagnostics. So, for example, when the prospect puts in data and then they get access to data that's relevant to them, like a personalized PDF. Provide high-level case studies. And I'll have a nice quote here. Too much business-to-business thought leadership and marketing is identical. Articles open with the same ponderous sentiment. So try to be distinctive so that you're memorable, so that your investments in content are actually building your brand. Channels. With complex solutions, they're not looking for new suppliers frequently. So you need to think about the long term and how to spread out the frequency over time. Journalists, focus on them to try to get quoted in their pieces, look to events and webinars, look to LinkedIn ads, create a community, like a Facebook community, for example, Discord community, Slack community. You're trying to generate leads that are going to be nurtured. So measuring things like pipeline revenues, kind of pointless at this point. And key metrics to track: input, number of opinion pieces, articles and publications, keynote speeches, indicator, read, shares, views, email opens, number of media mentions that are positive, outcome metrics, number of articles featuring thought leadership, number of relevant people engaging with content, time spent engaging, industry analyst mentions, and direct people to the next step to keep moving them along. Hunter stage. They know what they want or are looking at solutions/providers, including your competitors. Relevant info to match their specific needs to your propositions. Be clear about how you are better. Don't be shy about that. Buyers form a cross-functional group, so you need to influence people in different departments. The audience expands even further at this stage. 57 to 70% of decisions are made before contacting you, so you need to focus on those digital channels to get noticed in their research and also through events and in-person channels. You want to get third-party endorsements from peers and market observers, analyst reviews and rankings, for example, awards, testimonials that articulate the problem, not just any testimonial, and case studies. Show you understand their businesses and have done similar work before that was successful. Distinguish what is good about you versus the competition. For example, deeper technical expertise or having a broader solution set may be relevant. Details of the product may be delegated to junior technical experts. So when you see that the people engaging with you are less senior, that there's a drop in seniority, that's actually a good sign. It's a serious buying signal that the decision maker has delegated down to the lower rungs to evaluate the details. All engagement with your content in this stage is a buying signal. If someone downloads content, then a well thought out email should follow because they are in the buying mindset. Facts, data, and testimonials are things that people value. You want to focus on similar problems that you solved in the past, your credentials and high-level benefits, specific and technical thought leadership articles, blog posts, case studies. For example, understanding regulation, process, industry, and change management as topics. Buyers tend to really like data, so try to get that as much as you can from surveys, from your CRM, etc. Look for trigger events, so new C-suite appointments, financial activity, mergers and acquisitions, office location changes, hiring surges. These are things that are going to prompt people to buy. You want to host events about regulations or other changes. You want to survey companies, provide digital diagnostics, for example, that produce a personalized PDF, and use distinctive imagery. So a lot of what we're talking about is very dry. It's kind of boring sometimes as business to business, but it would be a mistake to make your imagery just as boring. So for example, the author talks about using water visuals, like, I don't know, maybe flooding or waves instead of just sort of office environment stock photos. And that's more memorable, more effective. You need to appeal to a wider group, and often that involves procurement, finance, which is going to be interested in the value for money, and also IT, which is more concerned with your specific platform expertise. You want to repurpose your content. So for example, something you use to create a diagnostic could be converted to a podcast, an infographic, or a slide share. An article should be condensed into an executive summary and other tidbits. Track who is showing interest by gating part of your content. Now, that's also a big argument in the marketing world is, should you gate content? Should you force people to have to submit, for example, their email to get access to the content? Well, if you want to know what stage people are at, gating can be an effective means of doing that. Focus on niche publications where you can run ads and get published. Focus on paid search terms that you want to be known for. do guest speaking at association events, for example, give technical webinars, figure out if you want to compete on price, speed, or expertise, or some combination. Show your products, so screenshots, webinars, slideshows, recorded demos, so IT is going to want to see that in particular. Articulate the benefit and the technical specs, so speed, costs, the fact that your product was designed specifically for certain types of buyers, and metrics, input metrics, number of proof points, case studies, tools, calculators, competitor tables, number of events, indicator, inquiries, engagement with diagnostic tool, open rate, searches, visits, attendance, outcome metrics, context, leads, pipeline, conversion rates, value of deals. Now we're moving on to the active buyer stage, closer to the bottom of funnel. Author doesn't like to use the word funnel, but most of you probably use that, so this is a rough translation. Companies generally overemphasize on attributes that matter less to buyers in this phase and are seen to be relatively weak on what clients value more and which are more likely to be differentiators. So the needs change over time. So if we go back to the top here, when people are in the active buyer stage and they're shortlisting, well, it's really the brand is the number one most important thing, as well as the quality of the subject matter experts. What matters now may be different from what got you shortlisted. So the decision criteria change. Detailed case studies are going to matter with specific results. They're looking for facts, stats, such as response speeds and feedback, quotes from clients, number of repeat clients, number of clients, geographic coverage, number of employees, number of awards, very specific facts. A lot of copywriters in business to business emphasize this, like Bob Bly, for example. Tons of facts, lots of information. That's what they need at this stage. Don't be afraid of downplaying competitors' advantages as well. For example, your competitor might have software that's easier to use, but the fact that your software has more data may have made a real difference in trumping usability. So don't be shy about saying that. Sometimes you only need to influence 10 to 20 companies if you're doing account-based marketing. Don't be dissuaded away from this if that makes sense in your case with enterprise software, for example. Now, you can also be very creative. So, for example, one of the demonstrations in the book is using out-of-home advertising that was concentrated at the client's headquarters so that they were constantly seeing your brand every day as they drove by. I thought that was a very creative application of account-based marketing. Metrics at this stage: input metrics, number of product videos, number of bids, pitches, office tours, indicator, engagement with collateral, feedback from clients at sales, number of demos watched, outcome metrics, closed one, win rate improvement, reduced length of time in pipeline. I just want to reiterate the point that the metrics that matter are not always just the outcome metrics. The number of new clients or the pipeline revenue is not always what matters. Sometimes all that is just measuring the effects of the inputs. You have to focus on the inputs because those are the causes that produce the stream of revenue in the future. All right, now the client stage. You're trying to drive loyalty with biggest clients, typically increase share of wallet, use account-based marketing if a large amount of money comes and growth ambition is expected to come from a small percentage of existing clients. 91% of customers say they will give referrals, but only 11% of salespeople ask. So in your sales enablement, make sure you get salespeople to try to ask for referrals. You want to look for trigger events like restructuring, downsizing, appointment of new people. A few tips for ABM, account-based marketing. You have one-to-one ABM, you have one-to-few ABM. So if you're doing one-to-few, for example, you can look for common challenges among clusters of clients. Input metrics: number of product videos, webinars, number of accounts in ABM program, thought leadership events. Indicator metrics: number of case studies, client attendance, meetings, co-hosted events, read, shares, downloads. Outcome metrics: brand perception, net promoter score, renewals, usage, increased pipeline, etc. Now moving on to a few more tips, especially as marketing is changing. We need to shift from transactional to value driven, especially in the sales process, especially when you're dealing with long buyer journeys. You need to influence the C-suite, but also the decision makers, which might be like heads of departments, and the end users. And there's a push type marketing from the top, from the C-suite, and then there's also pulling from the end users at the bottom. Now, a lot of people in product-led growth will say, well, just focus on the end users, focus on pull, but ideally you're doing both. You're squeezing from both sides. Now, the decision makers can be influenced by the end users, but the end users are also influenced by the people above them. 2 key metrics for chief marketing officers: cost of acquisition and lifetime value. People need to see info a number of times before they retain it. So doing things like frequency tracking. So running awareness ads, for example, on Facebook and LinkedIn, and saying, well, how frequently are you reaching prospects? Like, do they actually remember your ad? Probably not if you only reach them 1.3 times on average. Another key tip, and I'm summarizing here, but I'm saying be exciting. So much business-to-business marketing is boring and undistinctive, filled with the same stock images of working settings. So the problem with that is that even if they remember your ad, they might associate it with a competitor if you look the exact same. So leading companies, what they do is they use some of the most memorable brand assets, which are typically spokespeople, mascots, distinctive images. So for example, Salesforce has the kid in the costume and the little animals. Seems really weird. It seems inappropriate for business to business, but it's incredibly effective. Hewlett Packard did a similar approach with a big monster, giant IT monster. Have strong headlines, a strong point of view, show the product in action. Move buyers along. So if they read a piece of sponsored content in the Financial Times and go to your site for deeper insights, that's a sign they're transitioning from Horizon Scanner to Explorer. If they attend a webinar about cloud transformation, they could be transitioning from Explorer to Hunter. If they're studying technical specs or detailed case studies, they may be becoming an active buyer. So then you can reach out to them with more appropriate information. Now, if the people involved are going from senior and shifting from the C-suite to senior managers or heads of department, that might mean that the company is assembling a buying group, so moving deeper into the journey. Buyers move at different rates through the journey. Buyers can be slowed by shifting priorities or internal processes that have nothing to do with what you've done, and you also have very limited control over that, I would say. Now, traditionally, what we did in business to business was segment by company size, but increasingly what we're seeing is marketing around specific challenges that may reach people in businesses of varying sizes. So that's really more of a customer-centric approach. We offer click to buy because some businesses are at a more transactional starting point. So that's another thing, is that people are going through the journey at different paces, and they're entering the journey at different stages. So there's no reason to slow them down. If they're ready to buy now, don't shove them through your artificial funnel. And don't shove people directly to your product when they're unqualified. If they're just looking for thought leadership, they're not ready to look at your product. And it's going to be off-putting. Offer personalized follow-up. Make connection between your thought leadership and what you sell. Prompt the reader to go to another related piece of thought leadership to nurture them. Now, a few thoughts on business-to-business brand. Those that invest in brand typically outperform. Business-to-business marketing mostly hits buyers who aren't going to buy anytime soon. That doesn't mean that they don't influence people today, but the biggest impact is the 95% of people that aren't buying now. You want to focus on brand relevant memories. So if most people are going to buy in the future, they need to remember your brand today. Look for sponsorships or partnerships to reach new prospects. Brand advertising is forgettable unless your advertisements are remarkable. Better to have precisely targeted advertising constantly than large splashes. So general marketing best practice is to spread your marketing throughout the year rather than doing a giant launch event. There are exceptions to that, but in general, in business to business, unless you have some sort of big seasonality issues, you basically want to spread it out. And if that means you need to focus on a smaller audience, then that's what the author recommends. Stand out and be memorable. That means using distinctive brand assets. Your advertising, focus on surprise, challenge, reinforcing expectations. Position yourself as an expert to create or address unstated buyer needs. Use thought leadership to establish your brand. And note that the buyer may need to see the message 7 times before they embed it in their minds. Business-to-business buyers often want to renew digitally. They don't always want to talk to a salesperson. Sometimes chatbots are appropriate, even though they get a lot of bashing in business-to-business, probably because they're applied incorrectly. Provide good content. You can't control the process anymore, like in the old days where you held the prospect through their hand and walked them through your brochure. It doesn't work like that anymore. There are too many routes into the buyer journey. People are entering at too many stages. So the best approach is basically have a portfolio of content and channels and put it out there so that you're able to cater to people at various stages without necessarily controlling the flow that they go through. 77% of marketers attempt to prove ROI within a month, which is absolutely absurd when you're dealing with business-to-business products where the sales process might be 12, 18 months, and you're trying to prove ROI in a month. Doesn't make any sense. You're focusing too much on outcome metrics, not enough on the input metrics that are going to produce outcomes in the future. We're not marketing impulse purchases here. We're not selling $5 widgets. We're not selling Snicker bars. So you can't expect people to buy right away. And, this isn't business to consumer low ticket offers that we're dealing with. Marketers tried to measure effectiveness by channel. This is another conclusion I came to independently as well, is trying to structure your marketing budget according to channels. So we're going to put this much into Facebook, this much into direct mail, this much into cold email, this much into BDR work. It doesn't really make sense. Instead, you need to think about the stages and making sure that you're allocating this much to promoting yourself to the hunters, and this much to the active buyers, and this much to brand. And then later you think about the channels that are best appropriate for that. So for example, what the author found was events weren't very good at lead generation, but they're actually great at on-blocking stalled pipeline. So trying to measure every channel in terms of lead generation doesn't make any sense. If you're trying to limit budget, there's certain tactics you can use. And in my other video, I give more examples. But for example, switching to webinars because they're cheaper than face-to-face events. You also want to be efficient by targeting specific job titles. Very easy to do. For example, with automated cold email using Lemlist, which is what I do, or using LinkedIn advertising, another thing that I do. Taking the lead too early or expecting it to be overly nurtured are both suboptimal. So this is something to think about as a closing thought when it comes to lead generation. Is a lot of salespeople might want only the most qualified leads to speak to, but increasingly, if you're dealing with large strategic purchases, if you're dealing with account-based marketing, sales needs to be involved earlier than that to form a consultative type role rather than a transaction type role, because we see that people are willing to finish transactions digitally. They don't need to go through a person to do that. However, overly nurturing somebody is also not optimal, because there may be a role there for the salesperson to come in earlier and be able to influence them away from competitors and more towards you. But if the salesperson is involved too early, then really the prospect isn't ready for it. They haven't consumed your thought leadership. It's inefficient. So the most efficient marketing system is really somewhere in between there, where you are nurturing the leads as a marketing department, but you're getting the salespeople in at a nice level where they're able to have an impact, able to influence the prospect and ultimately make them a buyer, but not necessarily immediately.